about extending your writing and moving you away from peel. So it's this idea of moving away from a C-range response and what's expected of you right now in terms of your writing, and moving you towards a higher range and preparing you for senior English. So our learning intention for this video is to understand how to compose critical and sustained texts. So the key phrase here is that critical. When you move into senior English, if you're not being critical, you're not achieving the higher order and what is the desired effect in terms of your writing. And so what we're going to look at is an example of a writing that is in the C range and an example of writing that is in the upper range around a genre and responding to a convention, similar to what you're going to have to do in your task. So why are we moving away from peel? Okay, so we're doing it for a couple of reasons. One, to increase the sophistication of your writing. Peel is designed to help you get a structure in terms of your writing through 7 to 10. And the reason why I'm moving away from that is because we need to start developing your style or your voice within your writing. This is a natural progression. When you start learning how to write, you're told that a paragraph is 4 sentences long, and then as you keep writing, it gets longer and longer. This is just an extension of that. Okay, the basics of peel still exist, but it's moving away from that strict structuring. And the biggest part of it is being critical and actually having something to say in your writing that the structuring of peel doesn't necessarily allow for in a way that's required to move further. So a C-range response. This is an example. So I picked the horror genre, the convention of the final girl, and used Halloween by John Carpenter. So in this C-range response, it's the horror genre is full of conventions, one of which is the idea of the final girl. Final girl is the idea of the surviving character being a young woman who is seen to be pure and good-hearted. The final girl is the hero of these texts and are presented in such a way that the audience wants to see them survive. This is demonstrated in the movie Halloween, directed by John Carpenter, through the way he presents his main character, Laurie. Laurie is dressed in plain and modest clothes, which contrast the clothing of her friends who wear more revealing clothing. This one obvious way that Laurie is set up to be pure and gives the audience the understanding of why she is the final girl. So this paragraph, which I should have edited, by the way, follows a traditional peel structure. The first sentence tells you exactly what it's talking about. So it's going to talk about the final girl. It then sort of explains what's happening, and then it gives a piece of evidence, and then it links it all together. The problem with this is that it's adequate. This is the baseline of what your writing should be. It's one piece of evidence to support the assumption, and it is explaining what it means. It isn't prompting you to be anything more than just explaining what is there. If we contrast that with this paragraph, which already you can see is significantly longer, despite the horror genre being focused on the occult and macabre, there is a puritanical streak in the genre best reflected in the convention of the final girl. Traditionally, horror movies involve individuals dying at the hands of neither force, except, of course, the young female who is strong enough to survive. Strength in this case is not fortitude, but rather purity. Laurie Strode in the classic horror movie Halloween, directed by John Carpenter in 1978, is the prime example of this purity that defines the convention of the final girl. While her fallen peers all engage in adult behaviour, Laurie is the vision of wholesomeness right down to her modest clothing. Where her peers engage in activities concerning sexuality and experimenting with drugs and alcohol, Laurie abstains, seeking only to dance and hold hands with the boy she is infatuated with. Why is it that for a female character, being pure is equal to strength? It can be suggested that these movies are tales of morality for the audience. Laurie and the other final girls in this genre do not survive simply because they seem to be pure. Rather, their actions show they are attempting to do the right thing, the quality that we as an audience want to cheer for. So, the difference between those two paragraphs are things like evaluative language. I am making a critical judgment on both the text and the qualities of the text. I'm saying best reflected, classic, prime example. It can be suggested, rather the actions show. So I'm evaluating the evidence. I'm evaluating the text, and I'm also evaluating the convention itself. I'm using high modality choices. So instead of saying like magic, I'm using occult. Instead of gore, it's macabre. It's puritanical for being pure. Evil force rather than bad guy, fortitude rather than, surviving, purity, vision of wholesomeness, abstains, tables of morality. This isn't just one or two words, it's actually throughout the entire text. And if you look at it, what it's doing is it's showing a control of language that is beyond just the adequate. Again, let's go back to the C range. The language is very to the point, and it doesn't have high modality, high impact language, which means it is that adequate. It's doing exactly what it has to do to explain. But we're moving beyond explain. Okay, so we need to have the high modality choices. There is embedded evidence. Again, if we go back to the original paragraph, this is demonstrated through Halloween director John Carpenter presents Laurie is dressed in plain, modest clothes. So it's really separating the evidence from the argument and saying this is the evidence that proves my point. Whereas in this paragraph, the evidence is part and parcel. It's the same piece of evidence, but it's actually more than one piece of evidence to prove the point that I'm trying to make. So we have the modest clothing, which is the same one, and a quote, dance and hold hands. It's not the full quote, but I've manipulated it so that it matches what I'm trying to say. By making your evidence part of your argument, it's showing, again, a control of language that's much more sophisticated. And the last thing is flair and adding a bit of writer's voice. Things like adding a rhetorical question to lead into evaluation, adding figurative language, adding language that shows personality is the final step in terms of tying everything together. So why this matters is, one, moving into senior English. If you are seeking to do standard or advanced, this is the type of language that you need to start pushing towards in order to, if you want to do well and succeed. And alternatively, it's about clarity and control. It's about understanding how to use language for a particular purpose. This purpose is academic, and so this is an academic form of language. But if you can attempt to model this, it will make every piece of writing that you do better, because you're able to put your own voice into it so that a reader, no matter the purpose, can understand who is writing and why you're writing it. So hopefully this helps you understand the difference between a C range response and pushing towards that A range.